Father Richard Moore, a Catholic priest who is accused of homicide after the death of a 19-year-old college student who underwent a series of brutal exorcisms. Her name is Emily Rose. The church wants silence, the prosecutor wants justice. But in the courtroom, her terrifying story unfolds through a series of flashbacks. Emily, once a bright student, starts waking up at 3 a.m. and begins having all these terrifying visions, seeing demons everywhere, convulsions, and speaking in voices that are not her own. Doctors insist it was epilepsy and schizophrenia, but Father Moore knows it was something far more sinister. Father Moore conducts a series of exorcisms to get rid of the demons inside Emily. What follows is a desperate fight for Emily's soul. But unfortunately, the exorcisms fail. Father Moore blames the very medication she was given by the doctors, which apparently locked the demons inside. As the trial goes on, strange supernatural phenomena begin to haunt the priest and the lawyer that is defending Father Moore. A tape recording of the ritual reveals Emily's torment. And then there's a final letter. Emily claims the Virgin Mary appeared to her in a vision, offering freedom in heaven. But instead, Emily chose to stay and fight the demons, suffer, in order to be assigned to the world that, the devil, heaven, hell, God, all that exists. In the end, the jury finds Father Moore guilty of homicide. Emily is buried and her grave becomes a shrine for the believers. Now the haunting question remains, was she really possessed by demons, or was this a tragic casualty of faith and medicine colliding? This film leaves you shaken, because The Exorcism of Emily Rose is not just a movie. It's based on the real-life case of a young woman named Anneliese Michel, and her story is even more terrifying than the actual movie. In her late teens, Anneliese began experiencing terrifying visions, hearing strange voices, and having seizures. The doctors diagnosed her with epilepsy. But when medications failed and her condition worsened, her deeply devout Catholic family and the priest began to believe that something unholy was at work. Over 10 months, Anneliese endured 67 exorcisms, leaving her emaciated, broken, and dead at the age of 23. Her death ignited one of the most controversial trials in modern history and sparked a worldwide debate. Was she truly possessed by demons? Or was she a victim of mental illness and religious fanaticism? To some, Anneliese Michel was a martyr, a girl who endured unimaginable suffering for a higher purpose. To others, she was a tormented young woman, torn apart by blind devotion and the failure of others who could have helped her. Hi everyone, and welcome to Spooky Time with April. If you love creepy stories, haunted history, paranormal true crime, and all things that go bump in the night, you're in the right place. Today, we're diving into one of the most chilling and controversial cases of possession. This story contains disturbing topics including demonic possession, starvation, self-harm, and suicidal ideation. Viewer discretion is advised. This story takes place in Germany, and everyone in the story has German names, so I'll try my best to pronounce them correctly. And finally, before we dive in, I want to give credit to the authors of the books I read that helped me piece the story together. The first book I read was called Anneliese, A True Story of a Case of Demonic Possession by Lawrence LeBlanc and Jose Antonio Fortea. And the second book I read was The Exorcism of Anneliese Michel. I about said Emily Rose, that's the movie. This is the real life story. That one was by Felicitas D. Goodman. I highly recommend checking out those books, reading them if you want to know a little bit more about the case. There's some details in there that I didn't include in here because this video is already going to be long enough as it is. But I highly recommend checking those books out if you want a little bit more detail. Let's get into the true story of Anneliese Michel. Anneliese Michel was born on September 21st, 1952. She was raised in a small Bavarian town in Klingenberg, Germany. It's a quiet village overlooking the main river, known for its vineyards and traditional Catholic life. She was the first child born to Joseph and Anna Michel, born into a family that combined hard work, strict faith, and deep-rooted religious tradition. Joseph Michel, her father, had plans to become a Catholic priest, but he had a hard time learning Latin, so instead he took over the family sawmill. Her mother, Anna Michel, was very strict, deeply religious. She was shaped by her own personal tragic story, where she had a child before she was married with an unknown man. We don't know who this man is. And back then, I think it was like in the 40s, 1940s, in the Catholic community, it was a very shameful thing to do. But sadly, her firstborn, Marta, died at the age of 8 years old due to complications from a surgery. There's more to this story that plays a huge role in Anneliese's illness, but we'll get to that later. The Michels raised Anneliese and her 3 younger sisters, Gertrude, Barbara, and Roswitha, in a deeply devout Catholic household. They prayed the rosary daily. The rosary is a form of prayer focused on meditating on the life of Jesus and the Virgin Mary while reciting specific prayers. They attended Mass multiple times a week, and they were taught that humans could not atone for their own sins, that others were required to suffer and sacrifice for others in order to save them from eternal damnation. This is also known as penance, Penance. Remember that word? Penance. It plays a huge role in Anneliese's story. Sometimes their devotion took extreme forms. The girls were instructed by their parents to lie on the hardwood floor in the wintertime in order to repent for sinners' transgressions. And they also were not allowed to attend social activities like school dances because boys were going to be there. Despite this strict upbringing, Anneliese was very happy. She had a normal childhood. She was described as smart, quiet, and she was very close to her family. She really loved her family. But unfortunately, her health was very fragile. By the age of 5, she already had mumps, measles, and scarlet fever, and she had to be held back a year because of all these illnesses. Even so, she excelled academically and had dreams of becoming a teacher for the Catholic religion. At around the age of 13, in 1965, she started to attend secondary school in Aschaffenburg. She continued to thrive academically, even learning Latin. During this time, she was just like any other young teenager. She was laughing, hanging out with friends, having fun. For the first 16 years of her life, Anneliese seemed perfectly ordinary. But everything changed one day in 1968 when she experienced her first terrifying episode. This would be the beginning of a story that would horrify the world later. In September 1968, around her 16th birthday, Anneliese experienced something strange, something out of the ordinary. While sitting in class, she all of a sudden blacked out, but just for a moment. When she woke up, she was dazed and confused and had no idea what just happened. Her friend, who was sitting right next to her, witnessed the whole thing and was frightened, but Anneliese brushed it off, saying, "I probably just studied too much." They forgot all about it. They went on with their day. It was just a strange, fleeting moment. And that was it, or so they thought. That was it. That night, things took a terrifying turn. She woke up suddenly in the middle of the night to something pinning her down to the bed. She was completely paralyzed, could not breathe, could not move, she could not scream for help. Terror flooded her body, and she ended up losing control of her bladder, wetting the bed. It probably lasted only a few minutes, but for Anneliese, it probably felt like an eternity. When the episode ended, she got out of bed, she cleaned herself up, changed the sheets, and then she went back to bed. The next morning, she told her mom, Anna, all about it. Anna was like, maybe you should stay home and rest, take a day off from school, but no doctors were called at this time. And just like that, life went back to normal. A terrifying incident that faded into the background, a memory that was quickly forgotten. August 24th, 1969. Nearly a year later, the exact same thing happened. Anneliese experienced a blackout during the day, and then that same night, she was pinned down to the bed, paralyzed, unable to breathe, unable to talk, unable to move her limbs. She wet the bed. It was another terrifying moment for her. The first episode last year shook her up a bit, but she was able to get over it. But this second episode terrified her completely. This time she could not get over it. So the next morning, she told her mom about it again, and this time, they went to go see their family physician by the name of Dr. Gerhard Vogt. He examined her, but couldn't find anything physically wrong with her, so he referred Anneliese to a neurologist. Anna was apparently crashing out about this because they had to go to a nerve doctor. What will everyone in the community think? They'll think my daughter is crazy. They'll send her to a mental institute. She won't be able to get into college. She won't be able to become a teacher. That's what Anna was worried about. Dr. Siegfried Luthi, the neurologist, questioned and examined Anneliese, but could not find anything physically wrong. A few days later, on August 27th, they went back to Dr. Luthi and he performed an EEG, or electroencephalogram, which is a test that measures and records the electrical activity of the brain. The results of the EEG were normal. But because Anneliese had convulsions during these episodes, Dr. Luthi concluded this was probably a case of cerebral seizures of the nocturnal type with symptoms of a grand mal epilepsy. So let's break down what Dr. Luthi just told Anneliese and her mother. Cerebral seizures of the nocturnal type is when someone experiences seizures while they're sleeping. Symptoms of these type of seizures may include loss of bladder control, biting their tongue, stiffness in the arms and legs, jerking body movements, and during the day they may feel drowsy, have trouble concentrating, and there may be an increase in daytime seizure due to the lack of sleep. Grand mal epilepsy is an outdated term, and grand mal seizures are a symptom of epilepsy. So these types of seizures are now called tonic-clonic seizures, which are usually caused by epilepsy. And epilepsy is a neurological disorder characterized by seizures caused by abnormal electrical activity in the brain. Sometimes tonic-clonic seizures can be caused by other health issues, brain damage, infection, congenital abnormalities, tumors, metabolic issues, or drug and alcohol abuse. Tonic-clonic seizures occurs in two stages. The tonic phase happens first, which includes muscle stiffening. The person may release sounds like a cry or groan. The person may lose consciousness, and the person may bite their tongue. Then comes the clonic phase, where the arms and legs begin jerking rapidly and rhythmically. The person may have trouble breathing, and they may lose control of their bladder. So Anneliese had very similar symptoms to these type of seizures. She had paralysis, stiffness in her arms and legs, making it difficult to move. She had trouble breathing. She had a loss of bladder control. And both times occurred at night with warning signals during the day with the brief blackouts. It seemed to make sense. Anneliese found a logical explanation for her episodes. Epilepsy. No medication was prescribed at this time because the seizures had occurred about a year apart. But at least now they had an answer. So that's it, right? So now she can continue living her life as normal, get back to her daily routine, and live like a normal teenager. For a little while, things did return to normal. She went back to school, she attended church, spent time with her family. But little did Anneliese know that her life would soon completely spiral out of control. Things would very gradually get worse and worse. By the fall of 1969, Anneliese's health would soon collapse, but not due to the epilepsy. It started with just a sore throat, and then it got worse, so her tonsils had to be removed. After surgery, she contracted pleurisy, which is an inflammation of the tissue layer around the lungs or inside the chest wall that causes sharp chest pains and difficulty breathing. Then she got pneumonia, and then after that she got tuberculosis. Tuberculosis is a highly contagious airborne disease that is caused by a bacteria that primarily attacks the lungs. It's a very serious condition and can be fatal. Anneliese got so ill that she had to drop out from school. She spent much of her time at home, confined to her bed, completely isolated from the world. She was not able to do her normal activities. Her family had to help her with almost everything. In February of 1970, she was admitted to a hospital in Aschaffenburg. I don't know why she wasn't admitted like earlier, but when her condition failed to improve, she was sent far away from home to a sanatorium in Mittelberg, located in the mountains of Bavaria. A sanatorium is a historic name for a hospital that specializes in treating specific diseases. This particular sanatorium that Anneliese was admitted to specialized in treating bronchial and lung diseases in children and teenagers. These hospitals were often located in healthy climates, such as the countryside or the mountains, and they emphasized on fresh air, sunlight, and rest as part of the healing process, along with medicine, of course. These types of institutions were really important before the first antibiotic for tuberculosis, which was discovered, I believe, in 1943. I accidentally went down a little rabbit hole when I was trying to find a picture of the sanatorium that Anneliese was possibly at. If anything I say is wrong, call me out in the comments below. I know I'm about to butcher the names of these clinics. I apologize in advance, but I'm gonna do my best. Okay, I have my notes here, so I'm gonna look at it because These names just rattle my brain. Okay, so if my research is correct, Anneliese stayed at the Hochbergsklinik Middelburg, which is the current name for the clinic right now. And in German, Hochbergsklinik means high mountain clinic, according to Google Translate. It sits at an elevation of 880 meters or 2,890 feet. This particular institution went through several name changes. It first opened in 1926, and the original first name of it was Kinderheilstätte Middelburg, meaning children's sanctuary, and it focused on treating young patients with tuberculosis and other respiratory illnesses. During the time that Anneliese was there in 1970, it was called the Heilstätte für Kinder und Jugendliche. In German, it means Sanatorium for Children and Adolescents. Today is known as Hochbergsklinik Middelburg, and it operates as a modern rehabilitation center. Anneliese and the other girls at the sanatorium followed a routine of medical care, rest on sunny balconies, nutritious meals, and light activities. For Anneliese, it was a prison of isolation. She felt lonely and homesick, but she tried to find a meaning for her suffering. To add more fuel to the fire and make Anneliese's health history list of problems even longer, the doctors at the sanatorium diagnosed her with some type of heart and circulatory condition, but there's no information about this condition, so I don't know what was going on with that. It honestly would have been helpful to know if this issue maybe potentially played a role in what would happen later on to her, especially with another medication that she will be taking later on, which kind of affects the blood or potentially can affect the blood. Anneliese spent a lot of her time praying and contemplating about what she's going to do with her life. She wrote to her mother a lot. She confided to her mother a lot of what she was feeling, her thoughts during her time in the sanatorium. In one of the letters, she says, "There are no accidents in life. It is all in the providence of God. So I have arranged things with the Mother of God that I will become a catechist if I don't obtain the abitur. But in the case that I obtain it, I will become a school teacher." The abitur is an examination that students who graduate secondary school must take in order to get into college. Also, quick side note, the Mother of God is another name for the Virgin Mary, who was the woman who gave birth to Jesus. She is a very special figure in the Catholic religion, and also the Christian religion as well, and maybe other religions. In another letter, Anneliese writes to her mother, "Actually, I am quite glad that I have been sick. Since one comes to see things, one comes to recognize that there are other values besides money, riches, and cars, which are worth living for, that one is on this earth for the glory of God and not for transitory things." And in one chilling line, she writes to her mother, "You can mark one thing for sure. I want to go to heaven, cost what it may. To gain heaven, nothing is too much for me." Anneliese's mindset and this idea of sacrifice and suffering for salvation plays a huge role in the final years of her life. Just as Anneliese was getting over her respiratory illness, a new sickness began. This new sickness was never properly diagnosed. In her mind, this new sickness was not caused by epilepsy. On June 3rd, 1970, Anneliese suffered her third seizure. And once again, it occurred at night. She was paralyzed in bed, gasping for air, trying to scream out for help, wetting the bed, and just lying there in terror. Days later, something else happened. While praying with her rosary, she suddenly started to smell like this sweet fragrance. Kind of smelled like violets. The mountains outside her window glowed in radiant colors. Even her rosary was glowing. What's wrong with her? Is she okay? Anneliese turns around and she sees herself surrounded by the other girls in the sanatorium, and they had worried looks on their faces. Anneliese had been in some sort of trance. The girls watched Anneliese's hands while she was in the trance turn into cat paws, like when the cats stretch out their claws. They also claimed that her eyes went from her normal blue color to black. To the girls, this was a terrifying thing to witness, but for Anneliese, it felt kind of mystical. Anneliese claimed that she had a vision of Virgin Mary, and that Mary told her that her prayers had not been in vain and that help was on the way. This comforted Anneliese, and she wanted to have this experience again. It was almost like a high. Apparently when people have these ecstasies or visions, like a spiritual type thing, it kind of gives you like this high, so you want to have this happen again. So she goes to the exact same spot, she looks out the window, she holds onto her rosary, she's praying, and she looks out at the mountains hoping to see that same radiant, colorful glow. And all of a sudden, she starts to feel something. She thinks, this is it. I'm gonna see the Virgin Mary again. She's gonna send me another message. But what Anneliese saw was not something from heaven. It was terrifying. It was sinister. A horrifying dark face popped up for a split second, and then it was gone. Maybe it was just a part of her imagination due to the prolonged stress of being sick for so long and being away from her family, but Anneliese kept seeing these scary, grimacing faces, which she called Fratzen. And in German, Fratzen means grimace when you translate it to English. She told nobody, and she kept seeing these terrifying faces, and at one point she thinks to herself, this monster must be inside of me. By mid-June, Anneliese visits another neurologist by the name of Dr. Wolfgang von Haller. He performed another EEG, and the results were a little bit abnormal, but apparently not pathological. This time he prescribed an anticonvulsant, but we don't know the name of this particular medication. On August 11th, 1970, she had another EEG done, and the results were normal, but the terrifying faces still continued, but she didn't tell nobody. She didn't even tell the neurologist, Dr. von Haller. Years later, in 1974, Anneliese writes a letter to Father Alt, and we'll meet him later. He's a priest that plays a huge role in Anneliese, the exorcisms, and she described this period in her life when she was sick in the sanatorium. Warning, it does get a little bit dark, a little morbid. Then I became very ill, pleurisy and TB, and I felt even lonelier and more helpless than ever. My mother had so much work. I told her nothing, and things got progressively worse. I felt that God had deserted me entirely. I always wanted to off myself. I was deathly afraid I might become insane because I was so desperate. Then I felt God had not deserted me completely. I was able to pray again. I felt better and recovered. But unfortunately, I then had to go to the sanatorium in Middelburg. There, things went downhill. I suffered torture there. Prayer did not help me, and there was nothing else either. Then there was something like recovery when I was released after half a year, but somehow I was dead inside. Anneliese Michel was soon to be 18 years old at this point, but her suffering was just beginning. August 29th, 1970, after about 6 months in the sanatorium, Anneliese was finally able to return home to Klingenberg. But the girl who stepped into her family home was not the same girl who had stepped out to go to the sanatorium. Her family noticed the change immediately. Anneliese was no longer the bright, cheerful girl that they remembered. Instead, she was irritable, detached, cold, grumpy, and depressed. Her faith, however, grew even stronger. She began to believe that the horrifying visions were not just random hallucinations, but the work of the devil. These visions were not just terrifying to look at, but they were accompanied with a terrible smell. Anneliese described it as burning fecal matter. I have no idea what that smells like, and I don't want to know, but I'm sure it is awful. When September arrived, Anneliese returned to school, but now she was 2 years behind because she's missed so much school. Even her friends noticed she was completely different. She was quieter, more withdrawn, and all she wanted to do was talk about religion and have conversations about religion. And she was no longer doing very well in school. Her focus was not there, her grades were slipping. Okay, so Anneliese has already been to a few doctors here and there, like 2 neurologists, her family physician, some doctors in the sanatorium that diagnosed her with a heart and circulatory issue. But now Anneliese is about to be bounced around from so many different doctors, and honestly, I can kind of see why they took the route that they did at the end. I mean, I'm not justifying what happened at the very end, but if you know, let's say, I don't know nothing about the German healthcare system, but the American healthcare system, sometimes you get bounced around a lot from one doctor to another, and this is what is going to happen to Anneliese, and it can be very frustrating, time-consuming, a lot of money. On October 6th, she was sent to a lung specialist, Dr. Reichelt in Miltenberg. Her lungs checked out fine, but her record showed the circulatory issue, so that doctor referred Anneliese to another physician by the name of Dr. Packhauser. Dr. Packhauser wasn't as concerned about her circulation, he was more concerned about her history of seizures. So he wrote a letter to Dr. Vogt, their family physician, about how Anneliese had had several seizures in that year. So let's take a quick look at the timeline. Anneliese had her first seizure in September 1968, and then she had another one almost a year later in August 1969, and then a third one in June 1970. And then according to her mother, Anneliese had a fourth one just before her October appointment in 1970. And then there was also that smaller episode that happened in June when she apparently saw that vision of the Virgin Mary at the sanatorium. My cat is having zoomies. If you hear anything in the background, it's my cat. So at this point, Anneliese had about 4 major seizures in the past couple years, 2 years, along with maybe a few other seizures as well. Dr. Vogt didn't refer Anneliese to a neurologist. He just prescribed another anticonvulsant. So I don't know if Dr. Vogt added on to the same anticonvulsant that she was already taken, or if he just prescribed an entirely new anticonvulsant and she was only taking one. So she was either taking 1 or 2 anticonvulsants at this point. So Anneliese continued with her life, going to school, attending church, spending time with her family, the usual things that she enjoyed doing. On the outside, everything seemed fairly normal, but on the inside, Anneliese was being haunted by these scary faces and the terrible smells. Anneliese would later describe how she felt during these last 2 years of secondary school. I didn't care beans about anything anymore. Things got worse and worse that way. I became completely apathetic in those years, with no interest in anything that was going on. Sometime in June of 1972, Anneliese had her 5th major seizure. This one left her really drained. There was a few minor seizures that followed during that summer, and then all of a sudden, they just all stopped. I assume she was still taking her prescribed medication, so maybe the anticonvulsant was actually working and the seizures finally stopped. On September 5th, 1972, Anneliese, accompanied by her mother, Anna, went to go see Dr. Luti, the neurologist. Anna was very fearful that Anneliese was not going to be able to take the Abitur, the college entrance exam, because Anneliese was just so drained, had no energy, could not focus, her grades weren't that great now anymore. This time, Dr. Luti described another anticonvulsant by the name of Dilaudid, also known as Zentrapil. I'm going to assume she was taken off the other anticonvulsant and now she's just taken this one, the Dilaudid. Like I said, Dilaudid is an anticonvulsant, so it's used to control and prevent seizures. The most common side effects include involuntary eye movement, problems with coordination and balance, slurred speech, tremors, sluggishness, confusion, dizziness, sleep problems, and nausea. Anneliese didn't tell Dr. Luti about the supernatural thing she was experiencing, and also in addition to the scary faces and the smells, she was also having moments of absences, which is like the little blackouts, and also like moments of stiffness. By 1973, Anneliese had no reports of major seizures, but the battle inside of Anneliese was still going on, and no one knew. The doctors may have believed that they had Anneliese's condition, epilepsy, under control, but in reality, something far darker was only just beginning. Sometime in the spring of 1973, Anneliese's condition, not the epilepsy, the other supernatural condition, started to take on a whole new dimension. It wasn't just the horrific visions and the horrific smells, but now Anneliese was starting to have auditory hallucinations. She started hearing things. What's that? Anneliese wonders as she wakes up to the sound of a knocking noise that echoes through her bedroom. At first, only she could hear them, but soon her sisters could hear the exact same knocking noise as well. Anna took Anneliese to Dr. Vogt to get her hearing checked. Dr. Vogt referred her to an ear specialist, and everything was normal. Her hearing was fine, nothing unusual with her ears, the inner ear, everything was good. But yet she was hearing things, not just knocking noises. She began hearing voices as well, voices that told her that she was damned to hell for all eternity. So now Anneliese finally tells her parents everything, the distorted scary faces, the horrific smells, and hearing voices telling her she's going to be in hell forever. Anna, a devout Catholic, was terrified by what Anneliese had just told her. Joseph, Anneliese's father, tried to reassure Anna that it was just the epilepsy and that one day their daughter would be fine, she would get better, the doctors would cure her, everything would be fine and dandy. But Anna wasn't convinced. She knew that something supernatural was happening, and it was something evil. Anna told Joseph about one chilling moment. Anna walked into the living room and saw Anneliese standing there, staring at a statue of the Virgin Mary. But her face wasn't one of admiration. It was one of hatred. Anna saw Anneliese's hands contort into animal paws with claws, and her eyes were jet black. And this scene is eerily similar to the ones that the girls at the sanatorium saw. I'm assuming that Anneliese had another maybe like minor episode, minor seizure, making her hands cramp up and look scary, like animal claws. And her eyes, the pupils became extremely dilated, which made her eyes look black. Anneliese cannot catch a break. In April of 1973, Anneliese fell victim to another illness, rubella, also known as the German measles. She was bedridden for weeks, but despite the illness, seeing the demon faces, the smells, just that feeling of dread, she was able to pass the abitur and graduate secondary school. Anneliese would later describe her mind during this time. It was especially gruesome at the time of the abitur. It was a terror that goes through all my limbs and settles there. It is a dread that makes you think that you're right there in the middle of hell. You are totally, utterly deserted. You can call all you want for help, to the mother of God maybe, but they're all deaf. Even with her success of passing the abitur, apparently a really difficult exam, and graduating secondary school, despite all her setbacks, Anneliese was not doing well. She was not happy, she was exhausted and depressed. She was even a bit suicidal. She would later admit this to a doctor, but she states that she didn't have the courage to go through with it. In an attempt to lift her spirits, Joseph, her dad, suggests a trip to San Damiano. Anneliese loves San Damiano. This trip is exactly what she needs to rejuvenate herself, and maybe all the bad things will go away after visiting such a holy place. San Damiano is a small village, or like a big church community, where there have been reports of apparitions of the Virgin Mary along with miracles. People travel far and wide to visit this place. There's a popular folk tale about a woman named Rosa Quattrini Buzzini, also known as Mama Rosa. Rosa had a difficult time delivering her third child, and she contracted a really bad infection. She was sent home where she lived with her aunt Adale. Rosa was left bedridden and her health was deteriorating fast. But everything changed on September 29, 1961, when they received a knock at the door. They opened the door and there stood a beautiful woman who was asking for donations for candles for the sanctuary of Padre Pio, and we'll talk about him later. He's also important to the story. Rosa gave what little she had. The woman asked Rosa, "Do you believe in Padre Pio?" And Rosa said yes. The woman said, "You must visit Padre Pio." They prayed together, and then the mysterious woman touched Rosa's wounds, and all of a sudden they were healed and the infection was gone. Rosa stood up. Apparently she was not able to really move much, but she stood up and she exclaimed, "I have been healed." Rosa believed that the mysterious woman was the Virgin Mary. From that day on, Rosa was able to live normally before the infection. Rosa joined a pilgrimage to San Giovanni Rotondo, which is home of Father Pio. As Rosa was praying the rosary outside the church, she heard her name being called. She turned around and saw the mysterious woman that was at her door. The woman said, "I am the mother of consolation, the mother of the afflicted. Tell these words in San Damiano and to the professor who did not believe in your cure. After Mass, I shall lead you to Padre Pio." When Rosa met Father Pio, he gave her a mission. For 2 years, she was to care for the sick, attending to their physical and spiritual needs. And so Rosa did just that. 2 years later, her aunt Adale became ill. So Rosa returned home to care for her aunt. So Father Pio told Rosa that she would live through a great event, and the prophecy soon unfolded. On October 16th, 1964, Rosa heard a voice calling her from the garden. She took her rosary and went outside. A cloud descended and settled upon a pear tree, and from this cloud appeared the Virgin Mary, and she told Rosa, "My daughter, I have come from afar. Tell the people that all must pray, as Jesus can no longer carry his cross. You must help him carry it. I want everyone to be saved, good and bad alike. I am the mother of love, the mother of you all. You are my children. This is why I want all to be saved. If people do not pray, there will be great calamities. While you are alive, I shall appear here every Friday at lunchtime and give you messages which you are to pass on to the world." Frightened that no one would believe her, Rosa hesitated, but the Virgin Mary promised a sign. And then, before Rosa's eyes, the pear tree bloomed in full white blossoms, and a well was dug in the area. Pilgrims flocked to San Damiano, claiming to witness visions and miracles. Now, to better understand Anneliese and her story, let me tell you a little bit about Padre Pio. He was very famous during his time, and in some ways, his story mirrors that of the events that will soon take place in Anneliese's life. From childhood, Pio claimed to experience ecstasies, visions that left him trembling with both joy and fear. At just 5 years old, Pio vowed to devote his life to God, but just like Anneliese, his early years were riddled with sickness. Between the ages of 6 and 10, he had battled several illnesses, and then by the age of 17, he was living at the friary of St. Francis of Assisi, and his health just continued to decline. He could not eat, he could not sleep, and he was just plagued by exhaustion, and he suffered violent headaches and fainting spells. It was during this time that his followers believed the attacks began. Evil spirits, they claimed, tormented Pio while he was praying. They would witness him completely fallen still, eyes wide open, not talking, like he was in a trance. Some people swore that they saw Pio levitate during one of these attacks. In 1911, Padre Pio wrote about an unusual experience. Last night, something happened which I can neither explain nor understand. In the middle of my palms, a red mark appeared, about the size of a penny, accompanied by acute pain in the middle of the red marks. These marks are known as stigmata, and these physical marks manifest on somebody's body. They just kind of appear out of nowhere, and they're said to be correlated to the wounds that Jesus sustained when he was being crucified. Those who have the stigmata are said to have a special connection to Jesus' suffering, and it's a divine gift. Many of the Catholic saints are said to have exhibited stigmata. Eventually, Pio was moved to a convent in the mountains, but his health did not improve. So in 1916, he moved back to the friary before moving to San Giovanni Rotondo, where he would remain until his death in 1968. The stories of Mama Rosa and Padre Pio cast a long shadow over Catholic mysticism in the 20th century. Both claimed to have spiritual visions, both suffered from illnesses, and both carried out religious endeavors for the betterment of mankind. And then here is Anneliese, who also has visions. She's suffering medically and spiritually, and she's a devout Catholic who will receive a mission of her own, but this mission is something different than what Padre Pio and Mama Rosa was given. It will be something far more brutal. So, Anneliese, her father, Joseph, and a family friend named Tia Hein, along with other people from their religious community, arrived to San Damiano by a bus. Ready to pray her heart away, Anneliese steps up to the shrine. She stands there for a moment, and she tries to take a step forward, but she freezes. Confused, she tries to take another step forward to enter the shrine so she could pray, but she couldn't take that step forward. It was like something or someone was holding her back. Tia Hein watches Anneliese walk around the shrine in a wide arc and tries to get near it from the back. Anneliese sees people inside the shrine kneeling and praying, but to her, it sounds like they are praying while grinding their teeth. Anneliese walks back to the front of the shrine, and she looks at a picture of Jesus, and she quickly looks away. Holy images and those of saints, along with medals, were hard for Anneliese to look at because they sparkled so intensely. When her father bought Anneliese a medal for her to wear, she put it on, but she had to take it off because she said that it pressed down so hard on her chest that she couldn't breathe. And to top it all off, Anneliese tries to drink holy water from the well, but it burned her throat. Tia Hein discussed Anneliese's strange behavior with others from the group. Tia speculated that something sinister was going on. On the bus ride home, Anneliese's behavior became even more disturbing. She was talking in a really manly, raspy voice, she was spewing foul language, and she reeked of a really bad odor that everyone on the bus could smell. She even attacked Tia Hein. She tore the medal from her neck, and she shoved her down, and she also shattered the rosary. Tia should have been terrified, and maybe she was just a little bit, but instead she became determined to help Anneliese. In June of 1973, Anneliese saw Dr. Luti, the neurologist, again. He performed an EEG and the results were normal, so he believes the anticonvulsant, the Dilaudid, is working. But Anneliese was hiding the truth. She didn't tell him about the demon faces, which now look like devils with horns. She didn't tell him about the voices, nor the knocking sounds, at least not yet. By the end of summer, Anneliese told her parents that she did not feel well enough to attend college. She was still being weighed down by the depression, being haunted by these terrifying faces, visions, smells, and she didn't feel like she could focus well enough to make good grades in college. Anna, her mother, was not happy about this. She wanted her daughter to go to school, get a good education, and become a school teacher, for the Catholic religion. On September 3rd, 1973, Anna took Anneliese to go see Dr. Luti. This time she told the doctor everything. She even told him that the devil was inside of her, and she warned him that a fire of judgment was coming. What Dr. Luti told them next remains disputed. Anna claims that Dr. Luti told them to go seek out a Jesuit, which is basically a priest. Dr. Luti would later deny this in court. When I have a patient whom I cannot handle either as far as diagnosis is concerned or as an outpatient, I always refer that patient to a clinic and not a priest. The expression demonic possession is not medical terminology, and I have never used it. Anneliese did leave his office with a new prescription, Aolep drops, which is an antipsychotic, and an alleged suggestion to go see a priest. Anneliese's parents, Anna and Joseph, became desperate. The doctors were not helping, and the medications were also not working, despite she had not had a major seizure since June of 1972. She was still being tormented by the demon faces, the smells, the voices. So the Michels began their search for a priest. Their friend Tia Hines suggested reaching out to Father Habiger. They wrote to him, and soon after, Anna, Joseph, and Anneliese sat down with the priest. Father Habiger was also accompanied by another priest by the name of Father Rote. Anna and Joseph explained to the priest what had been happening to Anneliese and what happened at San Damiano. The parents were convinced that their daughter was possessed. But when Father Habiger looked at Anneliese, he just saw a shy, quiet girl. No muscle spasms, no violent outbursts, no signs of possession whatsoever. Father Habiger suggested that Anneliese go see a doctor, and that was the last thing Anneliese wanted to hear. Tia did not give up. She reached out to Father Adolf Rodovic, who is a Jesuit priest considered an expert in exorcism. He had even written a few books about the subject, so he seems like the right guy for the job. After hearing about what had happened at San Damiano, Father Rodovic asked for a written account of everything that had been happening to Anneliese. After he read through the list, he concluded that she was indeed showing signs of possession. But at the ripe age of 79, he was too old to get involved. Instead, he directed the Michels to another priest by the name of Father Herman in Aschaffenburg. Joseph gave him a call, and Father Herman agreed to meet with Anneliese. Father Herman would meet with Anneliese about 10 times from the fall of 1973 to the summer of 1975, and he would later describe the meetings. We usually talked about her problems for half an hour to an hour. She was a nice young girl, obviously from a deeply religious home. She complained that she was no longer herself. I am not my own ego anymore. Occasionally, she saw distorted faces, Fratzen, which she was unable to describe in detail. Once again, the Michels explained to Father Herman what had been happening, what happened at San Damiano, what Anneliese is going through. And once again, Anneliese does not display any of those symptoms of being possessed. So you know what Father Herman said? He suggested that they reach out to a neurologist. Again, Anneliese did not want to hear that. But at the end, they prayed together, and then he left, and that was it. Another referral to go see a doctor, which I'd say is the right move. They just have to find the right one, which they have yet to find. But Anneliese did not want to see any more doctors because they could not explain the darkness that was consuming her. Only a priest would understand. While Father Habiger and Father Herman dismissed the idea that Anneliese was possessed, the case still haunted Father Rote's mind. So he told his friend, Father Ernst Alt, about it. And for Father Alt, this was the beginning of his own personal mission to help Anneliese. Father Alt wrote to the Bishop of Würzburg, Bishop Stangl, about the case of Anneliese. And he called it a case of spiritual counseling, but he also mentioned that something far darker was possibly going on. He explained that some people believe Anneliese was either possessed or at least molested by the devil. Father Alt would soon experience things that were very similar to what Anneliese was going through. He had yet to meet her in person, but he received 2 letters. One from Anna, her mom, and then one from Anneliese herself. He attempts to read them, but he can't because all of a sudden he becomes lightheaded and nauseous. He feels like he's gonna faint. Later that evening, he attends Mass. During the service, something hits him in the back. He turns around, but nothing's there. Then the air around him becomes cold. And at the same time, he smells something odd. Smells like something's burning. He feels this negative energy surrounding him. Later that night, the strange events continue. He takes a strong sleeping pill so he can get some sleep, but his apartment is filled with like these variety of disgusting smells. He turns to his wardrobe because he hears these thumping sounds that sounds like something or someone is inside of his wardrobe. He starts praying. He even says a small exorcism in desperation. Feeling ice cold, yet drenching in sweat at the same time, he calls out to Father Pio. And then all of a sudden, the room fills with the more pleasant fragrance, like one of violets. The stenches vanish and his body warms up. Finally, the torment is over. He collapses into a peaceful sleep, but only for about an hour. The supernatural occurrences lasted until about 5 o'clock that morning. So he fell asleep at like around 5 o'clock, and I guess he had to get up and start his day. But that same day, he told the other priest, what had happened to him the night before and the evening before. Father Alt finally meets Anneliese a few weeks later. He describes her as depressed and pale, but in no way ill or sickly. So Father Alt is able to detect somebody's illness without a proper examination, without a medical degree. So people can have health issues that are not noticeable by their appearance. But yeah, I just thought that was kind of weird for him to say that. Anyway, during this meeting, Anneliese tells Father Alt that she is trying to find someone who will believe her. She doesn't use the word possessed. I don't know at this point if she believes she's possessed, but at the same time, she does say at one point that she feels the devil is inside her, but she does think something supernatural and something evil is going on. And she wants to find someone, particularly a priest, who will understand and help her. During their prayer together, Father Alt claims that he saw her eyes darken and that a shadow rose up from behind her. When the prayer ended, Anneliese smiled and said thank you. She felt relief. At this point, Father Alt becomes her spiritual counselor, and they would start to meet on a regular basis, I believe every couple weeks. In the fall of 1973, Anneliese leaves home to attend college in Würzburg. She moved into a dormitory, sharing a room with a former classmate. Being away from the strict religious life, back at home and living her own life might be good for her, right? Maybe the hauntings will kind of magically go away. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but the evil forces followed her to college. Even with the medication, which I assume she was taking, she was still haunted by the demonic faces, the terrible smells, and she just felt depressed and exhausted all the time. In November 1973, her friends invite Anneliese to a school dance. This would be her first dance ever, because she was forbidden to attend them when she was growing up. And that night, she meets a guy named Peter. It's kind of ironic how her parents didn't want her to go to dances growing up because boys would be there. They didn't want Anneliese or her sisters mingling with boys. But at her very first dance, she ends up meeting a boy. Peter found Anneliese to be friendly, animated, and fun to talk to. And Peter brought light and laughter into Anneliese's life. Her friends even noticed a positive change. But Anneliese tried to push Peter away. A few weeks after meeting him, she told him that she wouldn't be able to love him the same way that he loves her. But Peter stayed. He refused to leave her side, and he would remain by her side until the very end. She gradually opens up to him about her health issues and being depressed, but she leaves out the part about being possessed, at least for right now. On November 27, 1973, Peter drives Anneliese to a psychiatrist by the name of Dr. Leonard. She tells him that she's been depressed, has no willpower, can't concentrate, and that she is unable to love Peter. She tells him how she felt like she was in a deep hole the last 2 years of secondary school, and how she was having thoughts of suicide. Dr. Leonard determines that Anneliese is suffering from a case of neurosis, which is an outdated term used to describe a mental condition characterized by depression, anxiety, and compulsive behavior. He believes the neurosis was caused by an overbearing father and a strict mother who did not allow her to have any boyfriends growing up. So this caused some resentment. Anneliese was not very happy about this theory. She did not agree with it whatsoever. Dr. Leonard referred Anneliese to another neurologist by the name of Dr. Schleip. An EEG was performed, and the results showed some epileptic patterns in the left temporal region of the brain. So Dr. Schleip took Anneliese off of the Dilaudid and prescribed a different anticonvulsant by the name of Tegretol. Common side effects of Tegretol include drowsiness, dizziness, balance issues, nausea, vomiting, and constipation. More rare yet serious side effects include suicidal behavior or thoughts, blood cell problems, and severe skin reactions. While taking Tegretol, it's suggested to get blood testing done at certain intervals, but there's no evidence that Anneliese got any type of blood testing done. So my question is, what happened to that circulatory and heart issue that she was diagnosed with at the sanatorium? Because I feel like if you're taking a medication like Tegretol that can affect your blood, then it's important, especially with the circulation issue, to get blood testing done. That never happened, so Kinda suspicious. Sometime in December 1973, Anneliese tells Peter about the demon faces and the horrific smells, but Peter tries to reassure her that it's just something medical and that there's probably a cure for it somewhere, she just has to find the right doctor. But at this point, Anneliese was completely convinced that it was the devil. Through early 1974, Anneliese is living a pretty normal life. She's studying, spending time with Peter, and she sees Dr. Leonard and Dr. Slipe. And also during this time, Father Alt is meeting with Anneliese. He's praying over her. Father Alt recommended at some point that Anneliese should live a stricter religious lifestyle, but she should continue to see the doctors. Back in Aschaffenburg, the priests are discussing Anneliese's case. Is she really possessed by a demon? Is this the work of the devil? Are the demons controlling her body? No way. She's attending college. She's a young adult living a perfectly normal life for the most part. Maybe she's just being molested by the demons. Whatever is happening, something supernatural is at work. What's interesting is that on September 9th, 1974, Anneliese writes a letter to Father Alt stating, "I simply am not in control, and this often depresses me deeply." On September 16th, 1974, Tia Hein calls Father Alt angry. She is demanding to know why nothing has been done for Anneliese. Father Alt explains to her that Anneliese's condition is improving, but the very next day, Anneliese calls Father Alt in desperation. She needed him immediately. When they met, Father Alt described her as being in bad condition. He prayed over her as usual until she felt better. Father Alt writes a letter to Bishop Stungel requesting permission to perform the solemn exorcism in times of a crisis. The bishop said, no, and denied his request. Anneliese returns to Würzburg in the fall of 1974 to begin her second year of college. This time, she has her own dorm room. This year, Anneliese decides that she needs new friends. Ones that are just as serious about the Catholic religion as she is. Ones who will pray with her often and talk about current events concerning the church. Oh, and they must support the traditional aspects of the church, not the modern ones. Anna Liepert and Maria Klug check all those boxes. They pray the rosary together, they hang up holy images on the walls, and keep bottles of holy water by their doors. And they discuss their disdain towards the modernization of the church. Mass was now being said in German instead of Latin. Communion was being received in the hand, not on the tongue. For many Catholics, these modern changes were a good thing. But for Anneliese and her friends, it felt like a betrayal. They wanted things to remain the traditional ways. For a little while, Anneliese was doing well. She was happy to have found some friends who thought like she did, who was as passionate about the religion as she was, and there were no reports of odd behavior during this time. Maybe the evil spirits were finally gone. Maybe they just decided to leave her alone. Unfortunately, she was actually not doing very well. For a little while, she seemed okay, but things would soon go downhill. In January 1975, Anneliese has a follow-up appointment with the neurologist Dr. Schleip. Anneliese was looking very pale, she was hardly eating anything, and she was still very depressed. Dr. Schleip performed another EEG, and the results were normal, so the doctor instructed Anneliese to continue taking the Tegretol. Not only was Anneliese fighting her demons, literally in a way, she was also dealing with a few major changes in her life. Her grandmother had recently passed away, and two of her sisters moved out of the family home to begin their own lives. And Anneliese got two new family physicians by the name of Dr. Keller and Dr. Keller. They were a husband and wife duo. Anneliese did go see Dr. Martin Keller for a checkup. Dr. Keller was satisfied with her condition, but he referred her back to Dr. Schleip, who performed yet another EEG, and the results were normal. So she was instructed to continue taking the Tegretol along with the antipsychotic, the Aolep drops, which I assume she had been taking this whole time. But I remember reading one thing where apparently Anneliese told Tia Hein at some point that sometimes she didn't take her medication. I don't know which medication she was talking about, but I guess every now and then she maybe skipped a dose or something. Not entirely sure. On June 28th, Anneliese, her boyfriend Peter, and her sister Roswitha decided to make a trip to go see Father Alt. The priest says his usual prayer and blessing over Anneliese, which makes her feel better, but this time it didn't last very long at all. Father Alt picks up the phone. Hello? Anneliese is on the other end, begging for him to come visit her in Würzburg. She tells him that she is completely out of control and needs his help immediately. Father Alt arrives to Würzburg on July 1st. Anneliese tells him repeatedly, I'm condemned, I'm condemned. His prayers had always comforted her, but this time it did not work. So instead, he decides to say the exorcismus probativus, which is a trial exorcism to see if someone is actually possessed. And as he's saying this, Anneliese all of a sudden stands up in a defensive position and rips the rosary apart. Peter walks in the room and Anneliese turns around and in a deep, raspy voice tells him to leave. But Father Out didn't say this exorcism out loud. He said it in his head, but Anneliese reacted as if he had said it out loud. Father Out was rightfully shaken, and in his eyes he had no doubt that Anneliese was possessed. After this meeting with Father Out, Anneliese's behavior grew even stranger. She ripped religious images from the walls. She was not able to enter churches. It was like something was holding her back, and her legs were so stiff that she could not bend at the knees. So she couldn't bend down in a kneeling position to pray. One day, when Anneliese and her friends were hanging out, Anneliese all of a sudden covered her ears and told everyone to stop praying, but no one was praying, at least not out loud. One evening, her friend Anna Liepert witnessed something that she would never forget. Her, Peter, and Anneliese were hanging out, and all of a sudden, Anneliese's face twisted into a grotesque mask, like a Fratzen. According to Anna, it looked very demonic, and her body seized up, really rigid, and stayed like that for about half an hour. Peter casually explained to Anna that Anneliese's condition was due to the fact that she was possessed. Anna agreed right away and was like, oh yeah, she must be possessed. Like, what else could explain what just happened? On July 17th, 1975, Anneliese's parents drove to Würzburg and brought Anneliese back home to rest. Maybe the stress of college was getting to her, it was too much, so thankfully it was the summertime, so she could spend some time at home and rest. The next day, Anneliese and her parents went to go see Dr. Schleip. They were desperate. They needed answers, because Anneliese was not doing well at all. Even though she was not having any major seizures, she was still having these strange things happen to her. Dr. Schleip explained that there was an epileptic focus in her left temporal region of the brain. Okay, and now what? That doesn't explain, like, the things she's seeing, or at least the medication that she's taking is not helping with any of these hallucinations. And she's having all of them: visual hallucination, auditory, olfactory, with the smell. Again, they were sent home with the same diagnosis, epilepsy, and she was instructed to continue taking her medication. Anneliese was still suffering. Her legs were stiff, making it difficult to walk. She was constantly seeing the demon faces and hearing voices. She was unable to eat, unable to sleep, and the worst part, at least for Anneliese, is that she was unable to pray. Tia Hein suggested that they call Father Roth, who was with Father Habiger that first time, so Joseph, her dad, did give him a call and told him about the situation. Father Roth arrives to the Michel home. He walks into the living room. What's that smell? What's that horrible smell? It smells like burning feces. Joseph tells Father Roth that the smell only lingers where Anneliese had been. The smell was not located anywhere else in the house or anywhere outside. Father Roth walks to the kitchen where Anneliese is at, but then he stops all of a sudden because Anneliese comes running out of the kitchen and stops just a few feet away from him as if she was going to attack him. So Father Roth freezes in a defensive position, I don't know, maybe ready to fight or something. But then all of a sudden Anneliese turns around, begins to walk away, but then she turns back around and runs at him again, but then stops right in front of him. And of course Father Roth is like shook, like, what are you doing? And then right after these two fake attacks, Anneliese starts screaming, "Get out! You are tormenting me!" She then tears up a rosary and throws the pieces on the ground. Father Roth, who is, scared at this point, he reaches into his pocket in his coat and he's reaching for a crucifix that is out of view, like no one can see that it's there. But somehow Anneliese knows what he's reaching for, so then she starts to freak out. She runs over, grabs a 5-gallon container of holy water from San Damiano, and she plans to throw it on Father Roth. But somehow, I guess the water sloshing around, she drops it and the water falls beside her. So thankfully Father Roth did not get soaking wet during this visit. So Father Roth left, and now he has a very interesting story to tell his priest buddies. On July 30th, 1975, a few weeks after returning home, Anneliese and Peter go for a drive, just to get out of the house for a bit. They park on a quiet country road and get out to go for a short walk, just to get a little bit of fresh air, to get their minds off of the chaos that's, been happening. And then all of a sudden, Peter's eyes go wide. "Anneliese, what's wrong? Are you okay?" He's trying to talk to Anneliese, but she's not responding. She is now on the ground, on her knees, Before, her legs were so stiff she could not bend them even the slightest bit. And now, all of a sudden, she is down on her knees, just kind of looking up into nothing, and she's just there in that trance for apparently about 10 minutes. She's not talking, she's not acknowledging Peter, and after a while, Anneliese jumps up and she shouts, "I can walk, look at me, I'm free, I'm free." Anneliese claims that the Virgin Mary had visited her, so they rush home to share the exciting news. Anneliese runs upstairs and says, Mom, look at me, I can walk, I can jump, I can dance. The Mother of God appeared to me, but unfortunately, it did not last very long, because the very next day, Anneliese and Peter returned to Würzburg to register for the classes for the fall semester. When they entered her dorm room, Anneliese walks up to this crucifix that's hung up on the wall, and she's staring at it, and all of a sudden her body becomes stiff and rigid again. She has this hatred type of look on her face, and apparently she's growling like an animal towards the crucifix. And at the same time, she is reaching for this crucifix, but it's like something's holding her back, preventing her. She is bending backwards away from her trying to reach it. Terrified, Peter starts praying silently. I don't know if he's praying in his head or maybe he's kind of like whispering a prayer, but either way, Anneliese hears him. She turns around and commands him to stop. That same day, Peter takes Anneliese back to Klingenberg. Meanwhile, Father Roth writes a letter to Father Alt. There is no longer any doubt in my mind that the girl is under the influence of demonic forces. Father Alt agrees 100%. So he calls up Bishop Stangl and tells him that Father Roth and him are on the same page and they both believe that Anneliese is demonically possessed. Father Alt requests permission to perform a small exorcism on Anneliese. This time, Bishop Stangl verbally approves. On August 3rd, 1975, Father Alt and Father Roth perform a small exorcism on Anneliese in her home in Klingenberg. During the exorcism, Anneliese whimpers and moans a little bit. She even becomes violent and tries to knock the ritual book out of Father Alt's hand. And so both the priests are convinced more than ever that Anneliese is most definitely possessed. After this small exorcism was performed, life inside the Michel home turned into a pure nightmare. Anneliese slept only 1 to 2 hours a night. She kept everyone else up from running throughout the house. She shouted prayers hours at a time. She performed hundreds of violent genuflections, destroying her knees. So genuflection is the act of getting down on your knees, either one knee or both knees, to pray. But when Anneliese was doing it, she was doing it so forcefully and violently, she would fall to the ground really quick. Then she would get back up really quick. Then she would fall down again, get back up, and again, one after the other. She also tore holy images from the walls. She broke crucifixes. Even though she wasn't eating very much at this time, she decided to eat flies, spiders. She even grabbed a coal from the fireplace and would chew on that. She also urinated on the floor, and then she got down on her hands and knees and licked it up. And she also lashed out at her family. She would kick, bite, punch them. Peter, Roswitha, and her parents would take 2-hour shifts just holding her down so she would stop hurting herself and hurting others. And her body stiffened like stone, and it would stay like that for like several days, and then she would kind of like snap out of it, but then it would go back to being like super rigid again. And sometimes her muscles would get so tense in her throat and in her chest she could barely breathe, and she couldn't eat either. One day she crawled under the table and was barking like a dog for hours. She apparently squeezed an apple with one hand until it she crushed it and it turned to pulp, which I don't see how that's even possible unless the apple was like rotten or something. But like a hard apple, like that takes a lot of strength and force. She even hurled her younger sister Roswitha across the room like she was a rag doll. And Anneliese claimed that her dead grandmother and her long deceased older sister Marta visited her. And then came the wounds. Small oval-shaped wounds appeared on her palms and also on her feet. I talked about stigmata earlier with Padre Pio, but again, these wounds are associated with the crucifixion of Jesus, because these are like the same wounds that he sustained, like nailed through the hand and through the feet. I don't know if there's other type of wounds, but mainly those are the ones that people talk about when they talk about stigmata. And Anneliese claims that these wounds were not self-inflicted. By mid-August, everybody was exhausted. Father Alt at this point was on vacation, So they called up the old exorcism expert, Father Rodovic, and this time he decided to come to the Michel home and pay Anneliese a little visit. So in early September, he arrives to the Michel home, and he walks in and he finds Anneliese lying on the kitchen floor in a trance. Father Rodovic gathers information from Anna and Joseph, and he tells them to bring Anneliese into the living room and have her sit on the couch. Father Rodovic grabs Anneliese's hands and holds them, and he asks, "What is your name?" Anneliese, still in her trance-like state, she replies, "Judas." That single word confirmed everything for Father Rodovic. Judas Iscariot was one of the 12 apostles who betrayed Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. This betrayal led to Jesus' crucifixion. Judas felt extremely guilty, so he returned the silver and he ended up unaliving himself. Right as Father Rodovic was leaving, Anneliese runs up to him and slaps him across the face. She then turns around, walks to a piano, and starts playing it as if nothing had happened. Later on, Father Rodovic meets up with his priest buddies and he tells them about his encounter with Anneliese. And he says this is 100% clear as day a case of possession. So now all the priests are kind of in agreement that a major exorcism needs to be performed on Anneliese. Another priest by the name of Arnold Rentz was chosen to perform the major exorcism. Father Out will be involved, but he lived too far away to be like the main priest for it, but he'll be there for some of the exorcisms. Father Out writes to Bishop Stangl and gives him an update about Anneliese's condition and how everybody thinks, she is possessed. And he talks about the encounter that Father Rodovic had with her. He writes that Anneliese is in fact suffering and the church needs to take immediate action. Bishop Stangl grants permission to perform the major exorcism according to the Rituale Romanum. And inside this book is the official rite of exorcism, first written in 1614. The battle of Anneliese's soul was about to begin. So an exorcism is a ritual where a qualified person from the church attempts to protect or free a person or an object from demons or the devil. The ritual includes specific prayers, the laying on of hands, where a priest places their hands on a person's head, invoking the Holy Spirit, making the sign of the cross, and using holy water. The ritual that was going to be used from the book Rituale Romanum was over 300 years old during Anneliese's time. The rite of exorcism was actually updated in 1999, with the major exorcism being the last resort for those who are perceived to be demonically possessed. And in the process, a thorough evaluation from medical and psychological experts must be completed to rule out any other possibilities of a person's suffering. The 1614 version did not require the church to seek out medical evaluation. It was advised, but it wasn't mandatory. For Anneliese, she did seek out help from several different doctors, but none of them could, provide her with the relief that she needed. They did, in a way, help with the seizures, but she was still experiencing all the other scary, evil things. So now it was up to the church to try to help her and relieve her from this suffering. On September 24th, Father Rentz arrives to the Michel home to perform the first exorcism on Anneliese. Inside a small room, an altar is prepared with a crucifix, a statue of Jesus, a flower pot, and holy images of the Virgin Mary, Jesus, Saint Michael, the Archangel, and Padre Pio. Present during this exorcism was Anneliese's parents, Anna and Joseph, her two sisters, Roswitha and Barbara, her boyfriend Peter, and the family friend Tia Hein, and her husband, whose name is also Peter. And there was a few other priests present as well, besides Father Rentz. So Father Alt was there, and Father Roth, and Father Herman. Before the start of the ritual, Anneliese is acting very normal. She's talking with everybody, she's laughing, but on the inside, she is very nervous. So what happens during an exorcism? If you're a horror movie lover like me, you've probably watched an exorcism movie or two. Picture the Exorcism of Emily Rose, The Exorcist, or The Last Exorcism. These are obviously Hollywood movies, but they give you a visual. Basically, a priest will read the rite contained in the book Rituale Romanum, and he'll try to trick the demon into giving its name. This gives the priest power over the demon. Once the demon reveals itself, then the priest will command the demon to leave the victim's body. And finally, the priest will tell that demon to return back to where it came from. They prepare Anneliese for the exorcism. They decide to do it in an upstairs back bedroom, so if Anneliese screams, then no one passing by the house will hear it. Father Rentz starts it off by sprinkling holy water onto Anneliese. Her body immediately starts shaking violently. He then makes the sign of the cross on over top of Anneliese, and she lets out a horrifying scream, and then she starts fighting the priest, kicking, punching, biting, doing whatever she can to make him stop. Tia's husband Peter, Joseph, and her boyfriend Peter have to hold her down so she doesn't hurt herself or anyone else around her, and she fights with an insane amount of strength. For 5.5 hours, the room shook with screams, growls, curses. The demon who had revealed itself to Father Rodovic, Judas, did not come to play this time. This demon did not reveal itself. The first exorcism ended in exhaustion, and this was only just the beginning. This was the first exorcism of 67. On September 29th, Father Rentz decides to bring his tape recorder and record the sessions. It was difficult for him to write down everything while also trying to do the exorcism, so it was easier for him to record it, the audio, so he can look back at it, take notes, whatever he has to do. So those tapes are public. I'm sure if you know anything about this case, you have probably heard them yourself, but if you haven't, they're horrifying. The voice that comes out of Anneliese just does not sound human at all. Whether you believe in demons or not, listening to these tapes will send shivers down your spine. I'll play a little snippet for you so you kind of know what she sounded like. It's all in German, maybe even Latin. I'm not sure which one it is, but this particular clip I found was translated, so it's gonna be a little bit disturbing for some people, especially those who believe in demons. It's very unsettling. Okay, ready to hear what Anneliese sounded like during an exorcism? In 3, 2, 1.
That mich geht und das Volk nicht entführen. Oh.
Das ist die Scheiße.
Ja, das muss im Volk bewusst gemacht werden.
After the first session, the demons inside of her began to reveal themselves. And it wasn't just one. There was a total of 6. The first that came out again was Judas. And then...
And I am Lucifer, the devil in the flesh.
Next was Nero, who declared, I am the third of the covenant. Nero was a tyrannical ruler who executed many Christians. Then came Cain, who murdered his brother Abel out of jealousy. And next was Hitler. Adolf Hitler was possessing Anneliese, apparently. So as most of you know, Hitler was responsible for the Holocaust that killed millions and millions of Jewish people. And finally, the last demon to reveal itself is an ex-Catholic priest from the 1600s by the name of Fleischmann. Fleischmann, just like the other historical and biblical figures possessing Anneliese, was not a good person. Back in his day, he was a womanizer, he was a drunk, he assaulted women, and he apparently beat a man to death, I believe inside a church. And he did all this while being a Catholic priest. Anneliese refers to Fleischmann as the black one because apparently he wears all black. Back in the 1600s, Fleischmann apparently worked at the same parish in Edelben that Father Out now works at. There are rumors that the parish at Edelben is haunted by a ghost who has been described as tall and wearing all black. So some people associate this ghost as Fleischmann. To make things even stranger, Father Out claims that Anneliese knew very intimate things about Fleischmann's life that was not known anywhere else, like out in the public. Also, a very interesting thing is the demons inside Anneliese had a lot to say about the modern changes that were happening to the Catholic Church during this time. Lucifer snarled, "Today, no one believes any longer in the Immaculate Conception. The Church, at present, most believe it is only a community. The modernists are killing it ever more. We are hard at work at this. We throw poison into the Church. By now, those who believe are very few." Judas mocked the practice of getting communion in the hand. He also said the bishops are so foolish to believe the theologians rather than the Pope. This is the month of the Rosary, but very few recite it. Because the parish priests think it is not modern, they are foolish. If they knew its importance, it is a strong weapon against Satan and against us. Lucifer demanded that crucifixes and holy water be brought back into the home, and he said, the worst thing is that the doctrine of the church is being falsified. What Lucifer means by this is that many of the priests are now teaching more modern doctrine versus the traditional ones. Anneliese, along with many other people in her religious community, were very against these new teachings. I find it very odd that these demons were very concerned about these modern changes, which are the same topics that Anneliese was very concerned about as well. But of course, the demons kind of threw their own spin to it by saying, but yeah, we're responsible, or we did that. That's our doing. The exorcisms would take place 1 to 2 times a week. And in between these rituals, Anneliese would try to live a normal life. She continued to go to college. She's studied, she worked on her thesis, and she even prepared for a student teaching position. But she confessed to Father Rentz that the simplest of tasks were like impossible to do because the demons kept tormenting her, kept distracting her. They would even force her to sleep on the floor rather than her bed. She was being held back from mass, like she wasn't able to enter the church. And even if at times she was able to go to church, she had to leave early because all of a sudden she would just get sick. Sometime in September 1975, at the Engelberg Monastery, Anneliese claimed the Virgin Mary appeared to her. Mary told her, "It is a great suffering for my heart that so many souls are lost. It is necessary to do penance for priests, for the youth, and for your country. Would you like to do penance for these souls so that not so many are lost?" Anneliese told her parents about what Mary had told her. Her parents were very concerned about this, and Anna told her not to accept. But Anneliese responded, telling her that, "I need to do this, Mom. I have to, or else all the souls will be lost." Hi, Toby. Here's my cat, Toby. She likes to lick a lot. I don't know why. So, Anneliese accepts the Virgin Mary's offer. From that moment on, Anneliese believes it is God's will that she must endure the wrath of the demons. Now her torment has a purpose. She was chosen and meant to suffer for the salvation of others. No one can change her mind. And honestly, no one even tries to change her mind. Even towards the end, when things get really, really bad, no one speaks up or says anything. So the exorcisms continue. During one session, Anneliese wraps her hands around Tia Heim's throat. It took 2 men to get Anneliese off of her. Later, Tia would recall this event. She had the strength of a bear, yet she was a delicate thing. You can't imagine the strength she had. I thought at the time she would wring my neck. During another session, Father Rentz brought in several unmarked glasses of holy water. One from Lourdes, one from San Damiano, and then regular tap water. Anneliese only drank the tap water and avoided the ones with holy water. The demons were able to speak German, which is Anneliese's native language, but they were also able to speak Latin, which is supposed to be a sign of demonic possession. But let's not forget that Anneliese is fluent in Latin. She learned this growing up. So in order to see if the demons could speak other languages, which apparently they can, you know, they've been around for like centuries, so they know different languages, Father Rentz decided to speak to them in Chinese. He was a missionary in China for about like 15 years, so he knew the language. The demons, through Anneliese, responded in a very generic way to make it almost seem like they understood what he was saying to them in Chinese, but they only answered in German or Latin. The demons said, "I can speak any language, but speak to me in German." On October 1st, 1975, Lucifer reveals a secret. The other one of that village where the curse took place was an envious woman. That woman from your mother's village. Anneliese Michel's face went pale. She knew exactly what the demon was talking about. The story traced back decades before Anneliese was even born. Anna's first daughter, Marta, like we talked about before, the one who had died at 8 years old, she was born out of wedlock, which is a very shameful thing to do, especially back then in a Catholic family. The father, whose name remains unknown, married another woman around the same time Anna and Joseph got married. That woman was very jealous of Anna for some reason. So apparently this woman placed a curse, but it wasn't on Marta. The curse was meant for Anna and Joseph's first child, which was Anneliese. So if this is true, this meant that Anneliese was marked before she even entered the world, that the door for the demons were open long before her possession began. On October 6th, another exorcism was performed, and this time Father Habiger and Father Rodovic were present. Father Habiger watched in disbelief. How could a tiny, frail young woman exert so much strength and energy? He was very concerned. He asked Father Rodovic, what if the demons kill her? And Father Rodovic shook his head and said, "Don't worry about it. That doesn't happen. Demons don't kill. They only torment, because the angels prevent the demons from going so far as to unalive somebody. Anneliese claimed that several heavenly spirits were with her during this time, including the Virgin Mary, Padre Pio, a mystic and stigmatic woman by the name of Teresa Neumann, and a peasant woman who received revelations from the Virgin Mary and Saint Michael the Archangel, and her name was Barbara Vigant. Anneliese, in her diary, wrote down words that she thought came from the Mother of God. "You are going to complete the work of Barbara Vigant." On October 13th, 1975, the anniversary of the final apparition of the Lady of Fatima, the Virgin Mary visits Anneliese again. This time, Anneliese didn't have like a vision of the Virgin Mary. She didn't like see her, and she didn't like hear her. Instead, she received a message from her through a phenomenon known as interlocution. So basically the knowledge was just kind of transferred into Anneliese's mind. It's just kind of like poof, it was there. So Anneliese wrote down this message in her diary: "You will often receive inspirations of this kind from me," the Virgin Mary. "From now on, things will not always be easy for you. Tell this to Father Rentz. Remember, he is to be your spiritual counselor." The Virgin Mary also tells Anneliese something very exciting. She said that Anneliese will be free in October. And it seems like she was telling the truth, because during an exorcism on October 20th, Lucifer states that him and the other demons will leave her body at the end of October. But before the end of October rolls around, a few more exorcisms took place. On October 22nd, Lucifer says that in order to save many souls, penance has to take place. Anneliese writes in her diary that Jesus, the Savior, told her, "You will suffer a great deal and do penance even now. But your sufferings, your sadness and desperation will help me save souls." This idea of penance, suffering for others' transgressions, their sins, it's dangerously ingrained in Anneliese's mind. Is all she can think about at this point. October 31st rolls around. This is the day that the Mother of God and the demons said that Anneliese will be free. Father Rentz begins the ritual. He does everything that he always does. The demons, through Anneliese, roar and they rage. And then all of a sudden, silence. Anneliese jumps up and she shouts, "I am completely free, now completely free." Whew, what a relief. It's all over now. Anneliese and her family can finally get back to their normal life. This nightmare can finally be put behind them. They don't ever have to think about it again. It'll just be a thing of the past. To end the session, they all happily sing a closing hymn, but then a horrific scream ripped through the room. Anneliese's face twists in agony, and she shrieked, "I have not gone out yet." The demons had lied. Everyone was shattered, and so the exorcisms continued. Outside of the sessions, Anneliese was still going to school. She was surprisingly doing pretty well. She was making good grades. The Savior spoke to her one day, and Anneliese writes this in her diary: "You will pass all your tests," talking about the college exams, "but you're going to be called upon to undergo tests of an entirely different kind. I will give you my grace. You will be true unto death." By December 1975, something had changed. The demons no longer wanted any part of possessing Anneliese. During one session, they shouted, "Out, out, we wish to come out. We cannot bear it any longer." Some believe that the demons were being forced to stay inside Anneliese and forced to torment her. Remember, she has to suffer to save everyone from their sins. It's all a part of God's plan. At least that's what Anneliese, her parents, and the priest were thinking. 1976. A new year, and the demons are tired. The exorcism sessions are becoming shorter and shorter because the demons are just less talkative. And even though the demons are being more quiet, they're still tormenting Anneliese. She tells Father Rentz that they won't allow her to eat. And apparently during this time, it's wintertime, they won't allow her to wear a cap or gloves to go outside in the freezing temperatures. And they won't let her cover up at night. She has to sleep on the floor. They won't let her use a cover, so she spends all night shivering. And she also tells Father Rentz, "I always thought I would want to suffer for others so they would not have to go to hell. But I did not realize it could be this bad and this cruel and terrible." On March 3rd, Anneliese tries to return home to Würzburg, but as she approaches the train, her body stiffens up. She painfully makes her way back to the dorm, and a few other girls in the dormitory find her lying on the floor, curled up in a fetal position. They're very concerned, so they decide to call Anneliese's parents and tell them Anneliese's condition. And Anna and Joseph tell them that they'll have a doctor come over and check on Anneliese right away. So the girls wait around, waiting for the doctor to come. but one never shows up. So the girls call Annelise's parents again, and the parents tell them, don't worry, a doctor's coming. So the girls wait around longer, but no doctors show up. And at this point, Anneliese seems to be feeling better, so they just kind of forget about it. So now at this point, the parents don't think a doctor could really help Anneliese when she's having an episode, because they think she's possessed, and medicine isn't gonna get rid of a demon, I guess. The exorcisms are supposed to help, but so far they're not. On March 9th, Anneliese does visit a new doctor, which is a general practitioner by the name of Dr. Wolfert. She explains her entire medical history to Dr. Wolfert, but she leaves out the part about being possessed. In court, later, Dr. Wolfert testified that Anneliese made a psychologically normal impression, but I wonder what he would have thought if she would have mentioned seeing the demon faces, the bad smells, what's been happening with the exorcism, how she's been acting, the different voices that she's using. I wonder what he would have thought about her psychological state if she would have admitted to that part. Sometime in spring 1976, Anneliese visits Tia Hine at her home, and she begs her to keep one promise. Never, under any circumstance, should she or anyone else call a doctor, and Tia promised. Anneliese was very fearful about being found mentally insane and being sent away to a mental institution. In April, Anneliese tells Father Alt a very chilling prophecy. May and June were going to be very tough months, but July would bring a resolution. She even repeated the same message to Peter, her boyfriend, and also to her parents. So that kind of sounds like fairly good news, right? Like those 2 months would be tough, okay? But then July would bring a resolution, so everything would be better, possibly. Spoiler, she would in fact be free in July, but not in the way that everyone had hoped. At one point in April, the girls in the dormitory witnessed Anneliese in one of her episodes. They saw her lying in bed, completely rigid, unresponsive. Roswitha was there, helping to take care of her along with Peter. She was like hand feeding her applesauce, but she wasn't eating much at all, so she looked very thin, very frail. She was very pale. She basically looked like a corpse. And of course the girls would suggest that she needs medical attention. Roswitha would be like, oh no, she's been like this. She's seen many different doctors, but they have not helped her. And she's had these episodes before, and she recovers, so everything's all good. But on one night, March 1st, one of Anneliese's friends calls Father out and tells him that Anneliese had been up all night screaming. But the next morning, when he comes to see her, she's eating breakfast and looks perfectly calm and normal, like nothing had happened. Anneliese's deadline for her thesis was coming up, but she was not prepared to turn it in. She had not been working on it because, she's been possessed. Some of the girls had talked to the director of the dormitory, Dr. Fett, for her about extending the deadline for the thesis, but he said he could only do that if she was able to turn in a doctor's note. Father Out comes in and tries his luck and point blank tells Dr. Fett that Anneliese is possessed and she is being treated by exorcisms. Since the Bishop Stangl, approved the exorcism and he's superior, Dr. Fett was like, okay, I guess I don't need a doctor's note. After this, Father Out takes Anneliese to his parish in Edelben so she could kind of get away from the college dorm room area, that environment, and maybe being at the parish will allow her to concentrate better and work on her thesis. And also Father Out would be right there if she needs anything, such as an exorcism. Anneliese was only there for about a week, and then it was decided that she should return home to Klingenberg. While she was at Edelben, Anneliese tells Father Out something very disturbing. I know now what will happen. I know this coming summer will be hard and terrible, and I know I will not survive. No one can tell me any different. I will not survive. I wonder what Father Out was thinking at this time when she told him that she would not survive, because that's like a red flag to me. They continue with the exorcisms. I guess he just kind of dismissed the whole thing that she told him. The month of May rolls around and things just get worse. Anneliese is barely sleeping. She is barely eating. She is smashing her head into objects, rubbing her face into the wall. Her family is having to tie her down so she stops hurting herself. And now at this point she has bruises all over herself, abrasions. Her eyes are dark from just sleep deprivation and just banging her head and everything. Her mother said it looked like something like hands, invisible hands, were just throwing her down into the ground repeatedly. Toward the end of May, the college calls Anneliese's parents and tells them that Anneliese had missed the deadline for her thesis, and if she needed an extension, another extension, then they would definitely need a doctor's note. So then Joseph calls their family physician, Dr. Keller, and explains the situation and tells them that they need a doctor's note. But Dr. Keller only says that he could write a doctor's note if he sees Anneliese in person. So they agree to a house call, but then Joseph calls back and cancels the appointment because Dr. Alt had a friend who is a physician in Edelben who was able to write a doctor's note without even seeing Anneliese. So the extension was granted, and when Anneliese learned that the deadline was extended even more, she was somehow able to suppress the demons long enough so she could create a draft. And then Peter, her boyfriend, and Roswitha, her sister, they were able to type up the final paper, the final thesis, and they turned it in. On May 30th, Father Alt invites his friend, a doctor by the name of Dr. Richard Rote, to witness an exorcism. Dr. Rote had heard the tapes and was intrigued, but also disturbed because those tapes made him start praying again. He was curious to see Anneliese for himself, but as a spectator, not as a physician. Father Alt was happy to have a doctor there on site just in case something happened. Father Alt did ask Dr. Rote if there was something he could give Anneliese to keep her calm. Father Alt claims that Dr. Rote put some ampules and a syringe in his pocket before entering the Michel home. Allegedly, when Dr. Rote entered the house and saw Anneliese, he shouted, "Oh my gosh, she has a stigmata." He also tells Anneliese's parents, allegedly, that his knowledge of medicine would be no use here. There are no injections for the devil. Later in court, Dr. Rote would deny saying any of this, and he claims that he never even saw Anneliese's face. So he never saw how bruised up and beaten she was, or else, it would have been his duty to call for help. Apparently he only saw the back of her head in a dark hallway, and he only stayed for several minutes and then he left. Sounds a bit suspicious to me, like he's trying to save his own butt. He has a license he has to keep. By early June, Anneliese looked like a completely different person. She looked completely emaciated and battered from self-inflicted injuries. Her face was sunken in, her eyes were swollen with dark circles, her cheekbones were protruding, her teeth were chipped from biting a hole in the wall, and yet she still exerted so much energy daily. She fought against everybody all the time. She even would just run all throughout the house. She would perform those genuflections over and over and over again, and she refused to eat. Her parents would try to feed her, but she would just either shake her head back and forth trying to get the spoon, fork, whatever, away from her, or she would spit out the food. So not eating and exerting so much energy is not a good combination. During the exorcism on June 9th, Anneliese mutters just a few words in between agonizing screams. Absolution, I can't go on. This part of the story really breaks my heart. She did not have to go through any of this. Even though Anneliese was clearly starving herself and she looked, the way she did, like death. Apparently a similar situation happened the summer before where she kind of stopped eating, but then she recovered, she bounced back and she was okay. But everyone was so focused on July because she told everybody that there would be a resolution in July, as in maybe she'll be free from the demons and all this would be over with. But didn't the demons also say that they would be gone at the end of October? But that didn't happen. So what makes them think it would happen this time around? Apparently they did discuss seeking medical help during this time when things were getting really bad, but Anneliese kept refusing every time. She is an adult, right? So that's her legal right to refuse medical treatment. On June 27th, Anneliese has a fever of 103 degrees Fahrenheit. Joseph, her dad, calls a doctor? No. He calls Father Alt, but Father Alt tells him to call a doctor. But that didn't happen because Anneliese once again refused to see a doctor, refused to go to the hospital. Her temperature did eventually go back down. She just had to hang on a little bit longer. July was just around the corner. June 30th, 1976, the 67th exorcism. Everyone present is hoping and praying that her prophecy will come true, that she will be free in July, as tomorrow is July 1st. And this session will be the last one. But not because she will be alive and well the next day. Nobody there has any idea what's about to happen. Present during this exorcism is Anneliese's parents, Anna and Joseph, her boyfriend Peter, her sisters Roswitha and Barbara, and of course Father Rentz. And this day, Anneliese's fever was back. She was malnourished and exhausted. She was slipping away without anybody even realizing it. During this final exorcism, Anneliese asked Father Rentz, "Please, absolution." Later that night, after midnight, Anneliese whispers to her mother, "Mama, stay with me. I'm afraid." The next morning, around 7 a.m., Joseph, her father, enters Anneliese's room. She's resting peacefully for the first time in months. Joseph is relieved, so he leaves the room and lets her rest a little bit longer. About an hour later, around 8 a.m., Anna enters Anneliese's room, but she doesn't find her daughter sleeping. She finds something more horrifying. Her daughter is not breathing. Her heart is not beating. She is dead. She had been right the whole time. She had foretold that she would have freedom in July. Her soul had triumphed and the demons were sent back to where they came from. Her death was a heroic sacrifice, penance for the sins of the youth, priest, and for the entire nation. At least that's what her family and the priest thought. Some people till this day believe that. Dr. Keller came by and completed a post-mortem examination in order to issue a death certificate. But what he found was shocking. There lies an emaciated girl with bruises and abrasions all over her. He could not attest to a natural cause of death. Less than a year earlier, in October 1975, he had seen Anneliese and she was well nourished and seemed healthy. So what the heck happened? At around 1:30 that afternoon, Father Out contacted the district attorney in Aschaffenburg. He explained that Anneliese had died from many months of exorcisms, so the state launched a criminal investigation. An autopsy revealed that her cause of death was starvation, likely complicated by overexertion. At the time of her death, she only weighed about 68 pounds. Charges soon followed. Anneliese's parents, Anna and Joseph, and the two priests, Father Rentz and Father Alt, were indicted of negligent homicide. Bishop Stangl and Father Rodovic were also going to face charges, but those charges were later dropped. Rumors swirled immediately. A Carmelite nun claimed that she received messages from Anneliese saying that she had been sainted. In order to determine this, Anneliese's body had to be exhumed. Apparently, if someone had been sainted, then their dead body will not decompose. If that's true, and they do exhume Anneliese's body and she is not decomposed, then maybe Anneliese was actually possessed and she was, a saint because she did what she had to do to save people from their sins. So on February 25th, 1978, about 1 year and 8 months after her death, her coffin was exhumed. But her family was not permitted to see her body. Public officials declared that her body had decayed naturally. To the Michels and to anybody who believed that Anneliese was actually possessed, something was being hidden. I don't know why they would hide something like this. If her body was actually magically not decomposing, then that would be kind of this crazy phenomena that I feel like they would, tell the world. It'd be all over the news. But I'm sure her, body did actually decompose naturally, as it should. But what do I know? Anneliese was reburied near her home in Klingenberg. To this day, pilgrims will come and kneel at her grave and say prayers. The media, in typical media fashion, ate this case up. It was featured on television, in articles, in the newspaper, and magazines. The trial began on March 30th, 1978. On the first day, Joseph Michel asked if they could say a prayer before the trial began, because this case involved demonic possession. But the judge said no because this was a court of law, not a church. The priests were defended by lawyers funded by the Catholic Church, and the Michels were defended by one of Germany's most respected attorneys, Erich Schmidt-Leichner, who had defended Nazi war criminals. The goal of this trial was to determine what caused the death of Anneliese Michel and who was responsible. Witness after witness took the stand. Roswitha was asked why they hadn't called a doctor, and Roswitha clapped back. What would you call a physician for? Possession is not like a broken leg, Tia Hein testified that Anneliese refused to see any doctors and she did not want to be deemed mentally insane and be put in a mental institute. Father Rodovic told the court that nobody had ever died from demonic possession. However, there had been cases of deaths in false exorcisms, which are typically linked to personal fanaticism or occult practices and has nothing to do with the official rite of the church. The defense presented the infamous audio tapes of the exorcisms. The courtroom was filled with the growls, the guttural screams, and the curses that came through Anneliese's mouth. Those audio tapes were supposed to show proof that this was not some type of psychiatric illness. They also argued that Anneliese had the right to refuse medical help and she had every right to surrender to God. They also brought up that the autopsy revealed her brain was completely healthy and there was no damage to indicate epilepsy. And for the prosecution, all they saw was tragedy. They argued that this young woman did in fact have epilepsy, which turned into a psychosis which spiraled out of control. Her family's strict religious beliefs did not help the situation. To them, this was not a case of possession, but an untreated mental illness. 2 psychiatrists even examined Father Renz and Father Out. They found no indication of mental illness in Father Renz, but they said that he has a deeply religious personality rooted in magico-mystical thinking. And for Father Out, they concluded that he showed signs of schizophrenia. Both the psychiatrists agreed with Professor Satz, who testified that Anneliese's epilepsy had evolved into a psychosis, which went untreated, and it spiraled into a mental illness, which was exacerbated by her hyper-religious environment. If she had been his patient, he said that he would have tranquilized her, force-fed her, and given her electroshock therapy. Those treatments sound really harsh, but they probably would have saved her life. So in the end, the court sided with the prosecution. Anna and Joseph Michel and Father Renz and Father Alt were found guilty of negligent homicide, and they were sentenced to 6 months in prison. But the sentencing was later dropped, and instead they had 3 years of probation, and they had to pay all the court costs, and the priest had to pay really hefty fines. To this day, people are divided. Some call Anneliese a saint. Others see her as a victim of an untreated mental illness. In a BBC interview in 1978, Peter, her boyfriend, stood firm, saying, "I still believe she was possessed. Still now. Also, I think no doctor could have helped her. She told me that she could help other people through her sufferings." In the same interview, Anna, her mother, said, "The worst part of the matter is not that so much has been written about this case, but that in spite of it all, no one believes in the devil." So the worst part isn't that her daughter died in a very horrific way, is that people still don't believe in the devil. Fast forward to 2005, Anna Michel did another interview and she said, "I know what we did is the right thing because I saw the sign of Christ in her hands. She died to save lost souls, to atone for their sins." Anneliese was a kind, loving, sweet, and obedient girl. But when she was possessed, it was something unnatural, something you cannot explain. So the Catholic Church shifted its stance. Bishop Stangl, the same man who approved the exorcism, later wrote that exorcism should not replace medical help. Bishop Stangl resigned in 1979, and soon after he suffered a stroke, which, according to his friends, was brought on by the stress of the Anneliese case. He died later that year. By 1999, like I mentioned earlier, a new version of the rite of exorcism had been written. It included warnings distinguishing between a demonic possession versus a mental illness, and the importance of involving medical professionals. It's also important to note that the movie The Exorcist was released in Germany in 1974. This caused a bit of hysteria. Apparently, there was an increase in people seeking help for demonic possession, and psychiatrists claimed that their patients were affected by the movie. Even my dad said it was one of the scariest movies he had ever seen. So I wonder if Anneliese and those around her were potentially also affected by this film. Like, I don't know if they would watch something like this, being, like really strict Catholic religious people, but maybe they saw like news articles about it or heard, things about the movie. But her story, Anneliese's story, did inspire several movies. One of the most popular ones was The Exorcism of Emily Rose. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend, especially at night, alone. So, this case, the case of Anneliese Michel, also known as the Klingenberg case, remains one of the most chilling, complex, and controversial cases of alleged demonic possession. The big question remains, what really happened to Anneliese Michel? Was she truly possessed by demons, or was she suffering from an untreated, undiagnosed mental illness? Even for those who don't believe in demons, her story is pretty convincing. People said this frail, thin young woman would suddenly have bursts of inhuman strength. And she seemed to know things that she shouldn't have known, like when people were praying in their head. And some witnesses swore they saw her face twist into like a demonic looking face, her hands, contort into the animal paws with claws, and her eyes would turn jet black. There was also that terrible smell that followed her everywhere that she could smell, but also everyone else around her could also smell. And she predicted that she would be free in July, and sure enough, she did die on July 1st. And of course, there are those chilling audio tapes. Her voice was nothing like her own. It was deep, raspy, just completely terrifying. For believers, this wasn't a psychosis. This was a girl fighting a spiritual battle as a chosen victim soul, suffering so others might be saved. But on the other end, the skeptics see her story in a very different perspective. Anneliese had been diagnosed with temporal lobe epilepsy. This condition can cause hallucinations, staring blankly, smelling a strange odor, and convulsions. Some experts think she may have had schizophrenia or a rare condition known as Jeswin syndrome, which is a behavioral syndrome associated with temporal lobe epilepsy, characterized by altered emotional responses, impulsivity, and hyper-religiosity. Then there's the idea of shared delusion. Surrounded by a priest and a deeply religious family, everyone reinforced this idea in Anneliese's head that she was possessed by demons. Those who think she did suffer from a mental illness believe her death was not supernatural. It was clearly starvation due to neglect, as Anneliese, at this time, towards the end of her death, was in no way capable of making any rational decisions, especially medical decisions. So her family and the priest should have stopped her towards the end, like in the months of, May and June. In all honesty, Anneliese's story has no easy answers. What we do know is that she did die of starvation, but whether she stopped eating because the demons prevented her from eating, or because her own psychological torment, she made herself stop eating, it remains a matter of belief. Her parents were convicted of negligent homicide, but in a way they also suffered. They truly believed that they were doing the right thing. They did try different doctors, medications, and even exorcisms, but nothing helped. And in the end, they ended up losing a daughter. So, here's my opinion. A big part of me believes she was suffering from an undiagnosed mental illness, didn't get treated properly. But even then, back then, I'm not even sure, besides what that one professor said about the force feeding and electroshock therapy, tranquilizing. I don't even know what other, interventions they had back then for people with mental illness. It doesn't seem like it was very great. I don't know how effective it would have been. Maybe she would have spent the rest of her life in a mental institute, which isn't really a great thing, but at least she would be alive, more than likely. I feel like there was no easy way to deal with whatever was happening. But I'm not gonna lie, there's a really small part of me, very small part, that thinks, maybe she was possessed by demons. Maybe she did see all these visions of the Virgin Mary and Jesus telling her that she needed to do penance and save people from their sins. I don't know about that. I am a skeptic, but I guess we'll never really know. And that, I feel like, is one of the greatest tragedies, besides, of course, her death, is that we will never know the full truth. We can speculate, hypothesize, and guess all day, but no one has the answer. Well, I guess Anneliese has the answer, but, I guess we'll really never know. So, I'll leave you with a few questions. Do you think Anneliese was truly possessed by demons, or was she a victim of an untreated mental illness? And do you think her potential mental illness was a result of her hyper-religious environment, being brought up in a very strict Catholic family household? And if you were in Anneliese's parents' shoes, what would you have done? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story of one of the most disturbing cases of possession, give this video a like, and please subscribe for more spooky, mysterious, disturbing, and unexplainable stories. Until next time, stay safe and stay spooky.